Thank you, Will. First of all, I can't beat Will's bow tie. And frankly, nor can I beat his very charming southern accent. Coming from London these days, I don't hear that very often at all. Delighted to be here. Thanks for the very kind introduction. Frankly, the best part of the introduction is if you all step outside, there's this little board that says, Speaker Series Arun Sarin, CEO of Vodafone and Verizon. I wish that were the case. So just to be technically correct about this, I'm only the CEO of Vodafone. If Ivan Seidenberg listens into this situation, he would be particularly interested in knowing that I have made this distinction very clearly. Now, I'm delighted to be here. First of all, I'm delighted because I see so many young faces, faces that I think will be the future leaders of great companies and great institutions in the future. But I'm also very happy to be here because I've brought some sunshine for you. It's not very often that you come from London and people are thanking you for the sunshine that you're bringing. And equally, I can't see my daughter here in the audience, but my daughter is here. And there she is. She's a graduating senior, so I look forward to Nina graduating, and we'll be back in June as parents. But anyway, very nice to be here. Now, I'd like to do 4 things real quickly. Of the 60 or so minutes, 20 minutes or so, I'd like to talk to you. And 40 minutes or so, let's engage in Q&A. But I want to paint a picture for you. And the first picture is about what is the state of business in the world. And when I think about you, I ask myself, what is it that you all will need to know and confront in the next 10, 20 years of your working life? What is it that you need to know? And I'm going to try and point that out as clearly as I can. So I want to talk about China, and I want to talk about the European Union. Those would be the 2 areas I want to talk about. We can talk about any country we want to talk about, but those would be the 2 I want to highlight. The second is kind of the state of the communications industry. There's a lot going on in the comms industry. You're sitting here in the middle of Silicon Valley. There are 50 great ideas going on now, and I want to give you a perspective as to, at least from where we sit, from where I sit, how is the cookie going to crumble, what's going to happen, how a new thing's going to happen. I want to paint that picture for you. The third picture I want to paint for you is kind of what is the state of Vodafone. Where's Vodafone today, and where's Vodafone going in the future, as an example of one major player in the communications industry. And the last thing is around leadership. Having been in business now for 25 years, I've watched many, many great leaders. The question is, are there any common themes for great leaders? Big company, small company, startup company, whatever it is, sports teams, leading nations, institutions, whatever it is, are there common elements to leadership? And then after that, I'll open it up for Q&A. So that's what I intend to do for the next 20 minutes. Hopefully, I have your approval. Okay. So let's start with kind of the state of business in the world. And let me first start with a high-growth economy like China. And I'm not going to spend a lot of time telling you what you either know, or there are many other people who are better qualified to tell you about China and the fantastic growth and the change from an agrarian economy to an industrialized economy. That's not my point of talking about China to you today. My point about talking about China to you is you are going to have to be very comfortable doing business in China. So for those of you who don't have passports, or for those of you who haven't traveled, get your passport, travel to China. Go out there. See, within a matter of months and years, how much China is changing. I personally find it fascinating when I go to Beijing or Shanghai. I was there a year ago, 2 years ago, 3 years ago, the amount of change that's occurred. 3 years ago, lots of bicycles. Today, hardly any bicycles, all cars. 3 years ago, lots of organized bicycles going down a road. Today, cars going everywhere. Not as bad as in India, but pretty close. Right? The point is, you as future leaders, are going to have to be comfortable doing business in China. So get used to that idea. The question becomes, from a business point of view, what is important to remember about China? From a business point of view, what's important to remember about China is that it is a very large market. We have a company there called China Mobile. We have 300 million users in China. 300 million. All told, there are 400 million mobile phone users in China. It'll soon be 600, 700, 800 million. Again, the importance here is that China is such a large market that they will develop their own standards. So whatever standard they go onto and lock onto, the rest of the world is going to have to get used to dealing with those standards. Now, is there a little conflict here that any of you are feeling or whatever? Because frankly, for the last 50 years, the United States has been in that position. The United States has been in the position, whether it's telecommunications standards, computing standards, automobile standards, we've set the die, as it were. And the point here is because of the size of their market, they are going to now start setting the die. We're seeing it already. In the telecommunications business, we've got a standard, it's called WCDMA, that we're trying to have everybody around the world use so that you can take your mobile phone anywhere in the world and it works and all of that. Well, the Chinese government is promoting an alternate system. Now, the system is not as good as WCDMA, but who cares? It's like, we're going to do this, and we're going to press it into China. It'll get big. We'll have economies of scale. We'll have a bunch of manufacturers, Huawei and ZTE and others, kind of manufacture this stuff, and we'll take it around the world. Now, this is not the next 2 years plan. This is the next 10 years plan. This is the next 20 years plan. So whatever industry you're in, it doesn't matter. Watch, because China is going to be a big player in the marketplace. You can come back and do Q&A on this if you'd like. The other place I want to go to is the European Union. Now, the European Union is classically low growth. While China is high growth, EU is low growth. There's a lot of talk about EU. There's a lot of talk about European Union and how this is going to be another 400 million person economy competing with the United States possibly. I think the EU has a lot of work to do before it becomes a truly European Union. I find we've got very large businesses in Germany, Italy, Spain, the UK, France, everywhere. I still find the notion of economic union and European Union pretty far away from reality. You can talk all you want about it. You can think about the institutions that exist and the speed at which they're morphing. I think there's a long ways to go here, frankly. Now, the things that you need to watch there is, first of all, please be comfortable doing business in Europe as well. So this is not just about China, but it's also about Europe. But you have a little more time. And what I'd say about the European Union is that there are two key things. One is that the new countries that have acceded to the EU recently, are much more dynamic, much more ready to kind of do things, much more energetic than, frankly, the old EU countries. And in the old EU countries, you have to have Thatcher-like changes, big reforms to hiring, firing, capital formation, all of those things for those countries to kind of make the difference that they'll have to make in the future here. So that's kind of state of the business in the world. Let me move on to the communications industry. In the communications industry, all the things that you can think of classically in terms of what do consumers want, is technology changing, are new competitors coming in, is regulation changing, just about anything that you can think of, it's going on in our industry. It's almost like a perfect storm in some ways. There is massive upheaval, there's massive change, and the kinds of companies, whether it's Vodafone or Verizon or Comcast or any one of these companies that you might be familiar with, all these companies are going to change. 5, 10 years from now, these companies are not going to look anything like the company that you see before you today. Now, within this space, I want to kind of talk about two things. One is convergence. Convergence is basically another way of thinking about convergence is 3 screens. You've got a television screen, you've got a computer screen, and you've got a mobile phone screen. How do these 3 screens interact with each other? Who provides content to these 3 screens? And who does all the kind of magic in the back, as it were, whether it's middleware or access or whatever, to kind of make these 3 screens work together? Now, most of you are too young to remember, this whole convergence idea first came to the fore in the early to mid-1990s. And everybody talked about it, and nothing happened. Then again, when Web 1.0 came along in the late 1990s, there was another round of big convergence talk, and all of these things are going to come together. And the way most people talked about it was that Vodafone will get married to Verizon, who will get married to Comcast, and so you've got all of these different screens kind of coming together in terms of mergers. Well, much of that hasn't happened. Some of it is unlikely to happen, and it's unlikely to happen because of disruptive technology. There is a lot of disruptive technology, much of it within 50 miles radius of here, that is being generated that's going to change how these 3 screens work together. So the thing to remember about the communications industry is, first of all, customers, and I don't think this is limited to the communications industry, is that customers have a big say in the pace at which our industry will change. And while customers didn't want what people were serving them in 1995 or in 2000, in the next 5 years, customers will change their minds because more and more of us are now getting tired of the fact that our phones don't sync with our computers, don't sync with our television and all of that, and people are saying, how come? And the consumer attitude is very much of, faster, cheaper, better. So that's kind of what's going on in the communication space. Now, let's talk a little bit about Vodafone. Vodafone's a large company. Our market cap is $150 billion. We have 60,000 employees. We're in 30 countries. We have 180 million customers. Each of these customers gives us roughly $40 a month. And our free cash flow that we produce is about $12 billion a year. This is free cash flow after everything, right? So it's a big company. But here's a company that if you now say, okay, Arun, everything you've been talking about in the last 5 minutes in terms of the communications infrastructure, how does this company kind of fit into that larger picture and what's going to happen to you guys as time goes forward? So we've recently reorganized our business into 3 businesses. These are not the terms that we use internally, but I'll make it simple for you to kind of think about them. One is kind of mature businesses. So all our businesses in Germany, Italy, UK, etc., in the mature category. And what we're doing there is we've introduced a new generation of technology where you can get a mobile TV on your phone, you can download music on your phone, you can sync with your phone, you can do all of the classic things outside of mobile telephony and texting. Obviously, anytime you say mature, you have to say, and therefore you have to be concerned about costs. So we're reducing costs very aggressively in that part of our business. The second part of our business is emerging markets. So we've got very interesting companies in South Africa, in India, in Romania, in the Czech Republic, in Hungary, a bunch of other places. Fast growth. Our strategy there is very different. Our strategy there is market share, go grab market share, and new product introductions. One of the things that I personally find fascinating is if you go to a country like South Africa or India, the way people use their mobile phones. I'm sorry, if I'm confusing with mobile phones, cell phones, they're interchangeable. When I'm here, I'm meant to say cell phones. When you're in Europe, you're meant to say mobile phones. If you say mobile phones in Europe, people know immediately that you've come from America. But at any rate, so how people use their mobile phones is very different. So people are doing payments. Basically, it's almost like a currency in South Africa. I go buy a bag of potatoes, and I can either pay for my bag of potatoes using my cell phone, or more importantly, I can exchange minutes, essentially. It's a barter system. So those of you who are interested in kind of economics and kind of Federal Reserve stuff and currency stuff, 10, 15 years from now, we may have to rethink in some ways what is currency, what is M1, what is M2, and all of that good stuff. But the point for now is simply where there isn't a deep existing infrastructure for an institution, such as financial services, mobile phones are doing financial services. Equally, there are other great ideas that people are using mobile phones with, and frankly, one of the reasons for us to be in an emerging market is because there are some of the best ideas that we're getting are actually from some of the emerging markets, because people are much freer to think about what it is they want to do with their mobile phones. The third business that we've got is an area that we're calling new businesses. And here, what we're trying to do is all the classic barriers that customers see. For example, I can imagine many of you sitting on your personal computers, doing IM and having your mobile phone and being frustrated by the fact that a friend of yours who you'd like to kind of engage in an IM chat with is not on their PC. Well, very soon we're going to be introducing products where it doesn't matter whether you're on your mobile phone or you're on your PC, you'll be able to get an IM community around you that includes mobile phones. So as long as your friend's mobile phone is turned on, essentially they'll show up on your buddy list and you can have a conversation with them, right? The other frustration that a lot of customers have is around, you go into your home, how many vendors do I need to deal with here? Somebody gives me broadband, somebody gives me long distance, somebody gives me cable. So we are going to be in a business where you buy all your products from us. And our view is you only really need two products. You need a big broadband pipe to your home or office or whatever, and you need a mobile phone with fabulously big minute bundles, essentially. Between those two things, essentially, you're taken care of. And so what you'll see us do is get into these spaces and build the revenue base of our business. The number one challenge that we have at Vodafone is how do you keep a $150 billion company growing in a profitable way? Because you think about large companies, you think about Microsoft, you think about Intel, you think about Walmart. All of these companies, think about GE, have a big problem developing profitable growth. Because we are so large, and to find large quantities of profitable growth is the biggest challenge that a firm like ours faces. I'll move on to the last item I wanted to chat with you about, which is around leadership. In my view, there are at least three things that I find common among leaders. One is leaders have a very good ability to have a good strategic view of the world. You have to know, kind of, in whatever industry, how the cookie is going to crumble in the future. Because if you don't have a view, sometimes wrongly, but you have to have a view. You have to have a view of how the cookie is going to crumble. Where are you taking this institution in the future? Very clear. Because if you're not clear, people are confused. So typically, leaders will have a point of view about the future and where they're trying to take their institutions or their countries or whatever they happen to be leading. And having a strategic view is very important. The second is that there is an element of what I'll call operational leadership, which is just having a good strategic view is not good enough. You actually have to have goals that you're achieving and milestones that you're passing as you go along here. So being good from a thinking perspective, not good enough. You actually have to be able to execute, and execute flawlessly with your team. And the third is people leadership. You have to be good with people. If you're not good with people, chances are that you will not end up being a leader, at least of a large institution, simply because people want to be led by people that they feel comfortable with, that they feel like that they want to follow a particular leader. So the notion of human leadership and people leadership is tremendously important. So you could be the smartest person, but if you don't have good people leadership skills, that's going to stunt your growth. The third thing I'd say about this is that it's an and situation, meaning it is strategy plus operations plus people leadership. It's not or. The minute you put an or in there, unlikely that you're going to kind of make it to the very top. So it's an and thing. So the reason I'm pointing this out to you today is because oftentimes people aren't as clear about this early in their lives. And the point here is, one might do a quick self-assessment and say, am I a good people leader? And at your age, you don't really know. Some of you probably do, but some of you don't. The point is, if you work on it, I can assure you, you can be a good people leader. So it's not one of these things which is, gosh, I'll never, ever be a good people leader. If you're not sure about your execution skills and your operational skills, well, go to work on it. If you're not sure about your strategic skills, well, go to work on it, because you have a career in front of you. But as long as it's consciously in your head that you have to do these things well simultaneously to go to where you want to go, then you can learn along the way. I'm not in the camp that says that people are born leaders, and if you aren't born a leader, no way that you can become a leader. I disagree with that. I think leadership is a completely practiced art. And if you think it's easy to kind of stand up here and answer questions and give speeches and lead a company and all that, it all comes naturally, no, it doesn't. It's all practice. It's all practice. You work on it every day, and you get better as time goes on. The final thing I'd say about leadership is alignment. And when I say alignment, most people would think, you've got an organization, you better align your organization, you've got vision for a company, you have values, you've got goals. That's all true. But you have to actually be aligned further up the chain. You have to be aligned all the way from your shareholders, through your board, through your senior leadership team, through to your employees. I think a lot of companies get into trouble when their shareholders are misaligned in some ways with their companies. And as Warren Buffett has said, a company gets the shareholders that the company deserves. Yes, if you've got a bunch of shareholders who are kind of just doing wild things, well, you haven't clearly aligned your shareholders with what the company is trying to do and what their expectations should be. So that's around leadership. I think at this stage I'll stop and take questions. Yes, sir.
I would really like to hear more about your own personal journey and your inspirations, starting from India and right up to CEO of Vodafone, and in particular about any mentors or any inspirational figures that you learned from along the way.
So first of all, I've had many, many mentors in my life. One of the things about life is about learning. You have to constantly want to learn. And I know you all are young enough and you're at a great school and doing great things that might feel pretty normal to you. But people tend to either slow down on their learning path, which is, I think, not a good thing, because you want to be curious at all times so that you can grow as the world changes. So I've had, frankly, great mentors along the way. And I've learned something from a lot of people who are around me, both, frankly, from the positive side and from the negative side, which is you watch people and you go, this person does this really well. And you watch that person and you see how that person has kind of honed a particular skill. Equally, you can learn from others doing things and not doing them well and knowing not to do that. And actually, my personal journey from India to California for 30 years and now in the UK for the last 3 years is a story that has had a lot of luck in it, frankly. And by the way, I meant to say that about leadership, which is don't take yourself too seriously, okay? Just because you kind of make it up there doesn't mean that you're better than anybody else, okay? Luck plays a hugely important role, and I'll give you 2 quick examples in my own case. So I was graduating from high school, and I wanted to be in the Air Force flying planes. And my mother said, no, you won't go to this particular institution. I had no idea what I was going to do with my life, because she said I couldn't be an Air Force officer. So some friends of mine had an extra application form for this institution called IITs, which are engineering schools. I had no desire to be an engineer. Anyway, I took one of these forms, filled the form out, took the exam, got in. And then it became, gosh, you really don't want to be an engineer, but you've gotten into an IIT. And some of you may not be able to relate to this, but it's kind of sort of a big deal if you get into an IIT. And so it was like, okay, so now what are you going to do? You're going to go to an IIT, or you're going to, be a bum? So, all right, so you go to an IIT. Now, here you are studying engineering. I had no interest in engineering. But I kept doing well, okay? So then you graduate from your class. Again, did I want to come here to the United States and study? Not particularly. That was not my goal. But everybody who was a smart kid was applying to the United States. So I, too, applied. The next thing, you're admitted to Berkeley. I know it's not Stanford, but it's Berkeley. I'll tell you, Berkeley has a better reputation internationally than Stanford does. Believe me. Back in 1975, absolutely true. Today, I'm sure, John Hennessy would say, Arun, I'm going to challenge that. Anyway, so you come to Berkeley, you study engineering for another 2 years. Now you're into engineering 7 years. Still not interested in engineering. Okay? So then then I did a business. So I've studied engineering for 7 years, and I haven't practiced it for 1 day. Okay? So, and I can keep going on here in terms of luck plays a huge role. You can't actually design your career completely. I remember when I first joined Pacific Telesis Group, a couple of us joined on the same day. And I was given the assignment, this is in 1984, to look at the mobile business, the cellular business, and tell the senior executives whether this is a good business or not a good business, and how big it was going to be, and all of that. And my colleague who joined was given a similar assignment on the publishing side. So both of us came in. I got the mobile charter, and he got the publishing charter. And the mobile business grew to be a huge business that we sold to Vodafone for $75 billion. Whereas my colleague, basically the publishing business didn't go anywhere, and we shut it down 2 years later. Both of us hired on the same day, sitting in cubicles next to each other. Okay? So luck plays a very important role in life. Okay.
Vodafone has bought quite a few companies on emerging markets. What are the criteria you use to enter a new emerging market, and what do we do to integrate those companies into your business, which are very different from mature market business?
Yeah. So the principal criteria we use is, first of all, political stability in a country. In our business, we're a very capital-intensive business. We typically have to put down $1 billion or $2 billion or sometimes $10 billion just to kind of get service started in a country. So having political stability is tremendously important. The second thing we look at is industry structure, which is, is this country being run by some kind of rogue general who will give out another license to his son-in-law or his brother or whatever. So we are looking for good industry structure, good regulatory structure. We're looking, frankly, for the ability for our company to make money. We have to be able to see that there are revenues, there are profits, there is real growth in this country. And finally, that we uniquely can do something in that country. Because if we can't do something unique in that country, the question is, why should we be there as opposed to somebody else? So I'd say those are the 4 acquisition criteria, as it were, that we use. Equally, in terms of integration, we have a very big tent at Vodafone. As you can imagine, the number of cultures that we cross is massive. So if you think about our core values are around passion for customers, passion for employees, passion for results, and passion for the world around us. And then you can manifest each of these things into local cultures in some ways. Our brand values are around being red, passionate, rock solid, dependable, restless, ADD, which is kind of, are you constantly innovating? Are you thinking about new stuff to do? So if you can look at it from a core value standpoint, you can look at it from a brand standpoint, pitch a big tent, make sure that cultures are kind of respected in the process. But equally, at the end of the day, those are the 4 things that we drill down into each of our operating companies. Yes?
You've already mentioned some
aspects of leadership that you thought were important. But as you look at kind of the role of the CEO, especially Vodafone, what do you spend your time doing most of the time? And how do you see your role? What's your job?
Yeah, good question. I ask myself that question a lot too. So, in today's environment in the communications business, I'd say I'm spending between 15 and 20% of my time on communicating with important stakeholders, whether it's my shareholders, whether it's my employees, whether it's industry leadership. I'd say a fifth of my time is actually talking to people, helping them understand where Vodafone's going. Now, I think it's a disproportionately large number, frankly. And it's a disproportionately large number because we've got shareholders in Britain, we've got shareholders in the United States, we've got shareholders in Asia, we've got shareholders everywhere. The industry is changing. Our company is changing. And change is hard. People talk about change management and this and that. Take all that theory in and then kind of make it more complex than that, and that's how hard change is. So you have to communicate clearly with people about where the firm is going. So I'd say that would be 20% of my time. I'd say I would spend typically 30% of my time with customers, and the remaining 50% of the time what I'll call operations reviews and people reviews. You've got 60,000 people. Every one of these people wants to be the CEO of Vodafone. And so the point is, how do you kind of bring people along, essentially? So that's how I spend my time. Yes, ma'am.
You were saying a lot of your experience is about unlock, but what drives you today to do what you do?
At this stage, I'd say what drives me is the ability to make a difference and the ability to do good. You're in a unique position, whether it is in corporate social responsibility, whether it's in running a professional, ethical, high-energy business, whether it is the ability to influence governments to kind of do the right thing, the ability to develop products that will be useful for society. So I think, at this stage, it's about, making sure that Vodafone's doing good, because Vodafone is a very large part of the economy of virtually every country that we do business in. It's just massive. I mean, it's now been proven that countries that have good mobile telecommunications infrastructure, if you have 10% higher penetration in a country, the GDP that you're producing is 0.7% higher for having every 10 percentage points more in penetration. So we're, in some ways, a lubricant for commerce and a lubricant for running countries. So the ability to do good is enormous. Yes?
Some wireless operators have been criticized for being very protective of their customer relationships in terms of their potential suppliers, content suppliers, services, and applications. How do you see supplier relations, and how vertically integrated do you think wireless operators should be?
Yeah. So first of all, I'll tell you, any company that is not guarding jealously their customer relationships is a company in trouble. Okay? We've spent billions and billions of dollars bringing on board these 180 million subscribers that we have. So obviously we guard our customers very, very tightly. Your question is more around, okay, so do we have a walled garden around all our content, or is it going to be open, or what's going to happen here? So when we first started providing internet-like services to our customers, we started off with a walled garden because, frankly, we didn't know what the customers wanted. Customers, frankly, didn't know what they wanted in the mobile space. And so the easiest relationship we could develop with our customers was one where we gave them a walled garden experience. Now, frankly, walled gardens don't last for a very long time because there are lots of people with big chainsaws that are kind of cutting holes into walled gardens. And frankly, that's the process that we're going through. So today, if you ask me, is Vodafone a walled garden? Yes, we're a walled garden. 5 years from now, do you think we'll be a walled garden? Absolutely not. Because Now, as Web 2.0 kind of comes alive in some ways, and whether it's an eBay or it's a Google or it's a Yahoo or it's a Microsoft or whoever it is, each one of these people want entry into our customers and to our portal. We will give them this entry, but now the economics and who's doing what is much clearly understood. And I think you'll see the walled garden opening up and Vodafone and other companies providing access to content. Now, if you take the question further and say, will we be developing original content ourselves? Highly unlikely. Frankly, we're not any good at, making animation movies or making music or making television programs. Other people do that much better. And I think that's an important concept, which is you've got to do what you're really good at. We're very good at acquiring customers. We're very good with customer relationships and CRM. We're very good with billing. We're very good with providing basic services, but we're not movies. We're not movie people. Yes?
You mentioned corporate responsibility.
Yeah.
What type of things is Vodafone doing, especially when they're in emerging markets?
Sure. So, we are quite proud of our foundation. And our foundation does great things in a number of different countries. Let me give you an example from South Africa, where we went to places where, frankly, nobody wanted to go, and people thought we were absolutely crazy kind of doing business in certain parts of Africa, certain parts of South Africa. And we actually took these shipping containers and took them to South Africa and put them down in places that are hard to do business in. And now, if you look at these containers, they're almost like the anchor tenant in a shopping mall. A whole bunch of industry has set up right around them, because inside these containers, we have 3 or 4 booths. We've got mobile phones. We've hired a local person and said, you're the local entrepreneur. Do you want to kind of resell our service? So we're employing people. People have access to mobile phones. These people come into these booths, call their villages, call whoever. Right next to these containers now are shops that have, selling vegetables or fruit or bread or whatever the case might be. And you go to these places now and you go, my God, we had no idea that we would be able to influence their lives so much. And that's one example of what we're doing. Yes, ma'am.
You mentioned the considerable amount of free cash flow that you guys can generate. And I wonder in what direction you are planning to steer that for growth. Specifically with talk recently in Texas about combining landline and mobile. And I wonder if that's something that's on your mind or if you're looking at another.
So the direction we're interested in moving our cash flows is up. And in terms of where we might use this cash flow, if you go back to what I said about what we want to do, our view is we don't need to own any landlines. Landlines is a business of the past. If you have it, you got it, and no problem. Make a reasonable rate of return and do what you have to do. But our view is that the world is actually going IP, Internet Protocol. So all our products and services are IP-based products. A lot of our competitors have mobile companies and have landline companies, and they're trying to bring these two companies together to kind of, say to a customer, you can do this and this together. Well, that's interesting, but that's not what the customer really wants. What the customer wants is a broadband connection and wants unlimited wireless using IP. So that's the direction we're going in. And my view is we'll end up, getting into the fixed line business, but in an infrastructure light way, which is buying access rather than having copper wires. In the back.
Could you talk about voice over IP developments in mobile and what's your perspective?
Sure. So voice over IP developments in mobile are clearly going to happen. They're obviously happening in very large quantities on the landline side. They'll come to the mobile industry. In the mobile industry, there are 1 or 2 complexities in terms of the pace at which voice over IP will come in. For one, there are 2 billion cell phone users out there. So to kind of change out 2 billion cell phone users is going to take, the next 5, 6, 7, 10 years. The second is, for voice over IP, you need kind of a data pipe, and you need to have broadband systems. we have invested at Vodafone incredible amount of money in this 3G technology that creates a data pipe. So we're going to be the leaders in this space, in the mobile business. And it's very different from landlines because in landlines, the access is much easier and international calling rates are higher, and therefore, the sense of arbitrage is much greater. So my view is voice over IP in the wireless world comes in 2, 3, 4 years in large quantities. In the back there.
I'm curious, when you graduated from Haas, how you looked at approaching your career, whether you looked at it as something you wanted to do that was entrepreneurial, or if you said, hey, I want to run a company that has, $180 billion in revenue, whatever, and why you picked communications, telecom versus some other sector.
Okay. Well, I knew precisely that I wanted to run a company that had 180 million customers. No, to be candid with you, I didn't have a clue. This continues with not having a clue. I graduated, I went to work for a management consulting firm. This is 1978. Energy was really hot. Oil prices were going through the roof. Kind of sounds familiar these days. So I went to work for EEA back in Washington, D.C. I was with them for 3 years. Then went to work for one of my clients, Natomas Company, a San Francisco-based oil and gas company. And Natomas was acquired by Diamond Shamrock, a Texas-based company. And my wife didn't want to move to Texas, so she said, well, go out and kind of pound the pavement and find yourself a job in San Francisco. Just at this time, AT&T was breaking up. And talk about deja vu. AT&T breaking up. We've reformed AT&T, right? So AT&T was breaking up 20 plus years ago. And they were looking for somebody who'd done strategy and M&A and all of that. And I went to work for the phone company. And then I told you the story about being assigned to the mobile side, and then one thing led to another. But frankly, again, if you'd asked me, did I have a preference for a larger company? Frankly, I've always kind of gone back and forth. There are things about small companies and entrepreneurial companies that are hugely exciting. And for me, for whatever set of reasons, I was equally attracted to a large company as well, just because of the resources and this notion of the ability to kind of do good, as it were, which I think you have less of in a smaller company than you have in a larger company. In other words, I didn't have a clue. I just kind of went forward, and whatever seemed interesting and exciting, I did. I do have to say something, as much as this sounds completely unplanned and kind of random and all of that, is I have enjoyed every single day of my working life. This may be a bit of an exaggeration. But I haven't been in a job for a long time going, what the heck am I doing here? I'm adding no value. I might as well do something else. And maybe those thoughts came to my mind, and I did go on to something else. But I have enjoyed every bit of what I've done in the last 25, 30 years, which is, again, a very, very lucky thing. Yes? Yeah, you gentleman in the hat.
Thank you.
Please put it on. You're very recognizable now.
You've had a great career, and you've touched on briefly having a daughter here at Stanford and a wife who's had some impact on choices you've made. Can you talk about your ability or sort of anchors in your life or other sort of rules you've lived by that have helped you manage a family and being there for your wife and kids despite having sort of this trajectory that's taking you to the top of a large company?
So first off, the one rule that I've tried to keep at the forefront at all times is do the right thing. I know this is not central to your question. I'll come on to it. But the point here is, as you think about who you are and what you're doing and the choices that you have to make, do the right thing is kind of the big picture thing. Now, frankly, if my wife was here, we've had to make some tough choices. And she was working in a very successful career, and I moved around a fair amount. So as a family, we had to make choices. I missed a lot of Nina's piano recitals and soccer games and all of that. So the point I'm making is, as a family, as a person, if you do intend to do kind of things that people consider big things, there are tough choices to be made. There's no kind of easy, I'm going to have it all, and I've found a kind of an elixir to kind of be able to do it all. There are tough choices to be made. And I've got to tell you, I'm not sure I got it wrong. I got it right all the time. So you make mistakes, but my advice to you is find somebody who either ends up being your wife, your husband, your partner, or whoever it is, who kind of understands who you are and where you want to go. Because otherwise, there'll be conflict. Yes, in the middle.
You've had an extremely successful career, but I was wondering if you could talk about maybe some times that weren't so good and failures you've had and how you deal with those failures.
Very poorly. So no, clearly, I don't know of anybody who's just had a completely straight line career, and the mistakes that I would say I've made have been mistakes about people. When I've misjudged a situation, and you kind of say, I'm going to go do this with thus and such, and you go there, and the picture is different from the picture that you thought. And so, and again, my view is, if you're going to do a lot of things, this is all about improving your odds. It's all about probability. You want to do more things right and a few things wrong. And you want to minimize the wrong things, and you want to maximize the right things. But in my case, I'd say the mistakes have been principally on my judgment on people. And the way to handle it is, frankly, to kind of say, I'm going to learn from this, and I'm not going to do it again. And just put it in your DNA. What was the mistake that I made that last time? And is there a kind of a pattern recognition thing here? Am I getting ready to make another mistake? Or can I learn something from what? The key is, as long as you're learning from every experience, both good and bad, you're going to be okay. Yes?
You've alluded to a few of the new services that are available to mobile phone users, instant messaging, mobile search, things like that. Obviously, there are a lot of other interesting technologies on the horizon in the mobile space, from payments to location-based advertising to mobile television, location-based social networking, things like that. I was wondering if you could just talk a little bit about which of those are most exciting to you.
So let me categorize the answer in two buckets. One is anything and everything you see on a broadband wired internet service today, you will be able to get wirelessly. So whether it's auctions, whether it's commerce, whether it's whatever you can think about, including VoIP, whatever it is, you'll be able to get on your mobile phones. Principally because in the mobile phone industry, we too are going broadband. So we have broadband pipes, maybe not as broad as the landline broadband pipes, but plenty broad for most people. And the second is devices are becoming very interchangeable. Not everybody just is interested in a small phone. You've got PDAs, you've got a number of things that are going to come between a computer and a small mobile phone. So you'll see many, many devices, music devices, television devices, commerce devices, email devices, obviously. The second is mobility offers some unique things, such as location-based stuff. So there'll be some things that we'll do uniquely because our stuff is portable and mobile, but everything you can think of on a wired broadband connection, you can find on a wireless device.
I guess the question is, which of those services are most compelling in the mobile environment and also most monetizable?
Yeah. Okay. So music, mobile TV, location-based commerce, synced devices would be the top four. Okay. You want me to tell you how much money you can make in each one of those as well?
when you get to an IP everywhere environment like that, are you scared that then you become just a bit provider and less of a service provider?
Yeah. So, this notion of IP everywhere is clearly going to happen. I mean, you've got a campus like this, which is completely IP and so on and so forth. But first of all, I think of IP stuff in the next 5 years or so as kind of local area stuff, whereas we are genuinely in the wide area business. You can go anywhere in the United States, almost, again, and get a mobile signal. If you came to Europe, you'd find the service really good. And there's a reason for that, because the governments in Europe forced us to build out entire countries. Whereas here in the United States, nobody asked us to build anything out outside of kind of economic self-interest in building things out. So what you find here is big holes and all of that. But the point here is IP things are more local and mobile things are more wide area. Now, if you said, okay, Arun, let's go out 20, 30 years. My view is obviously if you go out 20, 30 years, clearly there'll be more and more IP around the world. In terms of bit pipe versus non-bit pipe, I actually find that kind of not a really relevant point of discussion. Because the point is, we will be in the access business, we'll be in the monetization of our customer relationship business, we'll be in the e-commerce business, we'll be in the, again, monetization of entertainment, whether it's music, whether it's TV, whether it's movies, whatever it is. So we will be in many other businesses than what you see a mobile operator in today. Yes?
Despite all these promises, 3G services have caught on very slowly. I mean, there were these discussions going on 5 years ago. And at the same time, I think there are people who say, okay, 5 to 7 years down the road, voice will be free. You will not pay for that anymore. And I think for a company like Vodafone, voice still makes up about 2/3 probably of your revenues. Do you think you can really make everything up with other services, or are you worried about that?
Am I worried about it? I am worried. Do I lose sleep over it? Not yet. And what I mean by that is you're absolutely right. In our case, actually, the voice is 80% of our revenues. But if you think about, again, the business that we're in the mobility business. Okay? Now, yes, you can have voice over IP. Yes, you can have dual mode phones. Yes, you can do Wi-Fi short distance. But the minute you come out of the campus here, you'll still need our 3G services. So the world we are going to is a world where we used to charge on a per minute basis. We've now migrated to a world where we've got big bundles. And I certainly hope all of you have big bundles from Verizon. And in the future, we'll be selling you data bundles. So you can do voice over IP, and you can do regular voice calling as well. Now, the question will become, okay, but if voice is free, and I've been hearing about voice being free for almost 10 years now. And voice is not free yet. Okay? And you might say, but it is with voice over IP, but it is because I can call my aunt in South Africa and it's a free call. Yeah, segments of voice are free. The other point is you're paying for the broadband connection. So it's not really free. You may think of it as free because the incremental cost to you is zero, but it's not really free. Don't get my comment wrong in terms of, do I think prices of mobile phones and everything else, is it going to come down? It's coming down 15% a year. So you try growing a business the size of Vodafone, where the unit price is falling 15% a year by any reasonable growth rate to keep a market cap of $150 billion. It's tough. So that's why, do I think about it? I think about it all the time. Am I hugely concerned? Not at this stage, because we have to find new revenue streams for the future. And that's the challenge. That's the core of the business. Yes, ma'am.
What was the strategy for Japan, and figure out how we do it?
In Japan. Strategy in Japan. For those of you who may not know, we've just come out of Japan. People had written off our business in Japan completely, and we just sold the business for $15 billion. So we came out of Japan, I'd say principally because of two things. One is, if you again think about industry structure in the future, the way the Japanese mobile market is evolving, it was very hard for us to see how we would make money for our shareholders long term. The second is, there's always this concept of, can somebody else do a better job than you can? And I think this is an important principle for all of you, which is, don't ever fall into the trap of thinking that just because you're large and you've got a big brand and you've got blah, 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 that you're the naturally chosen one to kind of do something. In our case, we got an offer from a company called SoftBank that's in the fixed line business. They're in the internet business. They're in a number of other businesses. They're in the content business. And they came to us and said, if we had mobile, we could package this up and we could actually give you a very high price for your asset. And when we looked at it in those terms, we felt that that was the best thing to do. And again, to just talk about Japan for a minute, Japan's a tough market. Japan's a tough market to make money in. It's a difficult market to make money in because many of your competitors have a very different headset about what the opportunity cost of capital is. We all sit here, we're all kind of familiar with what goes on Wall Street or the city and kind of the amount of money you have to make and cost of capital and all of that. Well, because you're in a 0% interest rate market, the headset that you have in Japan as to what you need to earn is very different from most of us who have to earn a reasonable rate of return. Otherwise, our shareholders get very upset. So when you kind of take all of that into account, you kind of say, all right, Masa, here's the business. You give us the $15 billion, and we'll give you our customers. And as you can tell, we're getting money next week. I'm very much looking forward to it. Will tells me that time's up. I've got to stop. So it's been fantastic to see all of you. All the best to you in your careers. One of the things you may not know, you are sitting here at Stanford University in Stanford in the South Bay. This is a fabulous place. I've had the opportunity to travel around the world, meet great people from around the world. This is very special. You may not recognize it today, but I'm sure you'll recognize it in 10 or 20 years. All the best to you.